War. It is a word that echoes through human history. It speaks of great nations, clashing armies, and grand strategies. But when you strip away the maps and the flags, what is left? It is the individual. A single person caught in a storm of chaos and fire. They are asked to do the impossible. They are asked to face down death itself. And sometimes, in the middle of all that madness, they do something so extraordinary, so unbelievable, that their story sounds like fiction. But these stories are not fiction. They are the absolute truth. They show us the very limits of human endurance and the strange, quiet courage that can bloom in the darkest of places. I have seen my share of things. I have felt the ground shake and heard the sky tear open. Our first story takes us to Japan in the final days of World War II. It is about a young man, an engineer named Tsutomu Yamaguchi. He was just doing his job. He was on a business trip for his company, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. The city he was visiting was called Hiroshima. On August 6, 1945, he was walking to the shipyard when he saw something in the sky. A single American bomber. He then saw a small object fall from the plane. He remembered thinking it was strange. Then, the world exploded into a blinding white light. A light so bright, it felt like 1,000 suns had been born all at once. The blast threw him into the air like a rag doll. He landed in a ditch. His eardrums shattered and his body burned. The city he had known just moments before was gone. It was replaced by fire, smoke, and the ghostly shapes of buildings that were no longer there. Somehow, through the chaos and devastation, Mr. Yamaguchi made his way to a train station. He found a train that was still running and boarded it, beginning the long journey home. He arrived in Nagasaki on August 8th, a ghost of a man, covered in bandages. He went to his office the next day, August 9th, to report to his boss what he had seen. He tried to explain the unbelievable destruction. His boss listened, skeptical. "A single bomb?" his boss asked. "That's impossible. You must be mad." At that exact moment, the world outside the window turned white again. Incredibly, the second atomic bomb had just been dropped, this time on Nagasaki. For the second time in 3 days, Tsutomu Yamaguchi survived a nuclear attack. Now we travel to the Balkans, to the Kingdom of Serbia, just before the Great War. This is the story of Mila Savic, a woman who wanted to serve her country so badly that she did something truly remarkable. When the Balkan Wars broke out in 1912, her brother received his draft papers. He was sick, and Milunka knew he could not go. So she made a decision. She cut her hair short, put on men's clothes, and enlisted in the Serbian army in his place. She told no one her secret. She was just another young soldier, ready to fight for her land. She fought bravely, a fierce and dedicated soldier. For nearly a year, no one knew the truth. She fought on the front lines, earning medals for her bravery and skill in combat. Her secret was only discovered after she was wounded in battle. During the Battle of Bregalnica, she was hit by a Bulgarian grenade. When the medics carried her to the field hospital to operate, they discovered that Corporal Savic was, in fact, a woman. Her commanding officer was stunned. He didn't know what to do. A woman in his combat unit? It was unheard of. He called her in. He didn't want to punish her. She was one of his best soldiers. But he couldn't have a woman in the infantry. He offered her a transfer to the Nurses' Corps. Milunka stood before him, tall and proud. She looked him in the eye and simply said, "I want to fight for my country as a combatant." "I will wait," she replied. And it is said she stood at attention outside his office for over an hour. Seeing her determination, he relented. He sent her back to the infantry. Mila Savic went on to become one of the most decorated soldiers in Serbian history. She fought through World War I, capturing dozens of enemy soldiers by herself. She was wounded a total of 9 times. France awarded her the Legion d'honneur twice, their highest honor. Russia gave her the Cross of St. George. She was the only female recipient of the French Croix de Guerre with a palm attribute. She was a true warrior who proved that courage has no gender. Her story was almost forgotten for a time, but she remains a powerful symbol of patriotism and unbreakable will. War has a way of finding the hero in the most unlikely people. Let's go to France in January of 1945. The war in Europe is nearing its end, but the fighting is still brutal. Here we meet Audi Murphy. To look at him, you wouldn't think much. He was a small, baby-faced young man from Texas. He was so small, in fact, that the Marines and the paratroopers had rejected him when he tried to enlist. The Army finally took him, but he still looked more like a boy than a soldier. But inside that small frame was the heart of a lion. His company was tasked with defending a critical position near the village of Holtzwihr. The German attack came hard and fast. 6 Panzer tanks and waves of infantry advanced on the American position. The fighting was intense. The Americans were outnumbered and outgunned. Soon, Murphy's company was being torn apart. Their tank destroyers were hit, and one of them caught fire, forcing the crew to abandon it. The American position was about to collapse. Lieutenant Murphy ordered his men to fall back to a safer position in the woods, but he stayed behind, alone. He had a telephone, and he was going to keep directing artillery fire onto the advancing Germans for as long as he could. As the German infantry got closer, Murphy did something insane. He climbed onto the burning tank destroyer. He knew it was full of fuel and ammunition and could explode at any second. He didn't care. He grabbed the .50 caliber machine gun mounted on top and began firing at the enemy. For over an hour, Audi Murphy stood alone on that burning vehicle, a single figure against an entire German attack. He was surrounded by fire and smoke, with enemy bullets bouncing off the hull of the tank. But he held his ground, cutting down wave after wave of German soldiers. He was wounded in the leg, but he kept fighting. He only stopped when he ran out of ammunition. He then calmly climbed off the tank, walked back to his men, and organized a counterattack. Through his single-handed act of unbelievable bravery, he had saved his company and stopped the German advance cold. When his commanding officers asked him what he had been doing, he simply pointed to the German lines and said, "They were killing my friends." For his actions that day, Audi Murphy was awarded the Medal of Honor. He became the most decorated American soldier of World War II, a true legend. Sometimes, the most incredible acts of war don't happen on the battlefield at all. They happen in the shadows. They are acts of quiet defiance and clever deception. Our next 2 stories are about men who fought their enemies from the inside. First, let's look at a German officer named Wilhelm Hosenfeld. He was a captain in the Wehrmacht, a member of the Nazi Party stationed in Warsaw, Poland. He was part of the occupying force, but unlike many of his comrades, he saw the humanity in the people his country was persecuting. He was disgusted by the cruelty he witnessed, and he decided to do something about it. Using his position and his authority, Hosenfeld secretly helped people escape persecution. He gave them false papers, found them jobs, and hid them from the Gestapo. He saved numerous Polish and Jewish people from the concentration camps. His most famous act of compassion came in the ruins of Warsaw in 1944. He discovered a starving Jewish musician hiding in an abandoned building. The man was Władysław Szpilman, a brilliant pianist. Hosenfeld did not turn him in. Instead, he brought him food and water regularly. He gave him one of his own officers' coats to keep him warm, an act that could have gotten him executed. He saved Szpilman's life. Now let's turn to another kind of secret war. This is the story of Juan Pujol Garcia, a Spanish chicken farmer who hated the Nazis. He decided he wanted to become a spy for the British, but the British rejected him multiple times, so he came up with a new plan. He would pretend to be a spy for the Germans first. He created a fake identity as a pro-Nazi Spanish official and convinced the German intelligence service, the Abwehr, to hire him. They sent him to Britain to build a network of spies, but Pujol never went to Britain. He went to Lisbon, Portugal instead. From a small apartment in Lisbon, Pujol created an entire fictional spy network. He used a tourist guide to Britain, maps, and public train timetables to create his reports. He invented 27 fake sub-agents, each with their own backstory and personality. His information was a mix of late news, plausible fiction, and pure imagination. The Germans loved it. They thought he was their best agent. Eventually, the British noticed that the Germans were wasting huge resources chasing ghosts. They realized what Pujol was doing and finally recruited him. They gave him the code name Garbo. Pujol, now working for the British, became the greatest double agent of the war, feeding the Germans misinformation that helped ensure the success of the D-Day landings. In the brutal fight on the Eastern Front, a new kind of soldier emerged, a soldier the Germans came to fear above all others, a sniper. And the most famous of them all was not a man. Her name was Lyudmila Pavlichenko. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Lyudmila was a 24-year-old history student at Kiev University. She immediately volunteered for the infantry. The recruiting officer tried to push her toward being a nurse, but she refused. She showed them her marksmanship certificate. They finally let her join as a sniper. They would not regret it. She was sent to the front lines during the sieges of Odessa and Sevastopol. This was not a war of grand battles for her. It was a war of patience, silence, and a single well-placed shot. She would lie motionless for hours, sometimes days, in the dirt and rubble, waiting for her target. She described the work as a tense duel. It was her against an enemy sniper. The first one to make a mistake would die. Lyudmila rarely made mistakes. The Germans grew to fear her. They called her Lady Death. She was a ghost who dealt out destruction from hundreds of meters away. Her official confirmed kill count was 309. This included 36 enemy snipers. That number makes her the most successful female sniper in recorded history. But the number does not tell the whole story. It does not tell of the freezing cold, the constant hunger, or the nerve-shattering tension of her deadly work. She once said, "The only feeling I have is the great satisfaction a hunter gets who has killed a beast of prey." This was not about hatred for her. It was a job that had to be done to defend her homeland from invaders. She was a hunter, and the enemy was her quarry. After being wounded by a mortar shell in 1942, she was pulled from combat. Her value as a hero and a symbol was now greater than her value as a sniper. The Soviet government sent her on a publicity tour to the United States, Canada, and Great Britain. She was the first Soviet citizen to be welcomed at the White House by a US president. She stood before crowds and spoke plainly about her experiences, urging the Western allies to open a second front in Europe. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was more than a soldier. She was a quiet student who became a legend, a woman who proved that the deadliest weapon on the battlefield could be a steady hand and an iron will. Our final story takes us to the frozen mountains of North Korea in the winter of 1950. The Korean War was raging. American-led UN forces had pushed deep into the country, but then China entered the war, sending hundreds of thousands of soldiers across the border. The 1st Marine Division found themselves cut off and surrounded by nearly 10 times their number near the Chosin Reservoir. The temperatures dropped to 30 degrees below zero. The ground was frozen solid, weapons jammed. Frostbite was as big an enemy as the Chinese soldiers hiding in the hills. The situation was hopeless. The Marines were trapped, outnumbered, and freezing to death. A journalist asked the division's commander, Major General Oliver P. Smith, if the Marines were retreating. General Smith gave an answer that would become legendary. He said, "Retreat? Hell, we're not retreating. We're just attacking in a different direction." It was more than just a clever line. It was a mindset. They were not defeated. They were fighting their way out. They would bring all of their equipment, and they would bring all of their wounded and their dead with them. No one would be left behind. What followed was one of the most brutal and heroic fighting withdrawals in military history. For 17 days, the Marines fought their way 78 miles down a narrow, treacherous mountain road to the sea. They were under constant attack from all sides. At night, the Chinese would swarm their positions in human wave attacks. During the day, the Marines would punch a hole in the line and move a few more miles south. Every inch of ground was paid for in blood. They had to blow up a destroyed bridge and have sections of a new one dropped to them by parachute to cross a deep gorge. They made it. The chosen few, as they came to be known, reached the port of Hungnam, battered but not broken. They had suffered terrible casualties, but they had inflicted far more on the enemy. They had destroyed several Chinese divisions and maintained their tactical integrity. They had attacked their way to safety. These stories, from the atomic hell of Hiroshima to the frozen hell of Chosin, show us something profound. They show us that war brings out the worst in humanity. But sometimes, in the darkest moments, it also reveals the very best. It reveals a courage and a resilience that defies all explanation. It is the unbreakable power of the human spirit.